314. Justice and the Law. Chalcedon Report number 207, November 1982. One of the most disastrous facts of the modern age is the separation of justice from law. Such a separation has existed before in history, usually as a product of moral corruption, sometimes as a result of cynicism. The modern separation is a product of philosophical and religious skepticism. Perhaps no other man in this century has had an influence on American law equal to that of Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr., 1841 to 1935. A 1944 biography of Holmes, Yankee from Olympus, by Catherine Drinker Bowen, in effect placed him among the American gods by its title. Holmes's grandfather, Abiel, was a Calvinist, his father, Oliver Wendell Holmes, a Unitarian, and the man from America's Olympus saw life simply as action and passion. Like proper Bostonians, he held that men could make their own rules out of human experience and abide by them. As an Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, 1902 to 1932, he held, "I am not here to do justice. I am here to play the game according to the rules." It was precisely this same separation of justice from the law and the reduction of law to the will of the state that created the legal climate which led to German National Socialism and Hitler, as John H. Hallowell demonstrated so ably in The Decline of Liberalism as an Ideology, with particular reference to German political legal thought, 1943. More recently, the late Princeton philosopher Walter Kaufmann, in Without Guilt and Justice, 1973, held that guilt and justice are theological concepts and have reference to accountability to God, and rightly so. Hence, a humanistic society should, Kaufmann logically insisted, abandon all concepts of guilt and justice. A more radical legal revolution is impossible to imagine. The fact is that revolution is now in progress. This is the reality of modern status law in virtually every modern state. It is also the reality, implicit in most cases, of virtually every law school. The exceptions are there, but they are few in numbers. As a result, justice has been separated from the state. The people, for the most part, are not aware of this philosophical fact of the separation of justice from law and the state. The appeals of politicians for votes still contain vague references to justice and then stress mainly special interests. The people go to court expecting justice and are bewildered by the results. As a result, a growing cynicism is in evidence. Ominous, too, is the rise of violence against judges. The rationale of the state and its reason for being is justice. For the state to forsake justice is to forsake its reason for existing. We have seen in recent years the steady decline of all churches which abandon their reason for being. If the church does not proclaim the gospel of salvation and history through Jesus Christ, it is like a father who, when his son asks for bread, gives him a stone, or when his son asks for fish, the father gives him a serpent. Matthew chapter 7, verses 9 and 10. Those churches which feed men stones and serpents are seeing the departure of their flocks. The bankruptcy of the modern state is similar, and perhaps greater. The modern state replaced the church as man's central institution. Even more, it became a saving institution, offering men the ostensible way to the good life, to brotherhood, peace and plenty. A religious fervour accrued to patriotism as a result, and flags replaced the cross as a symbol around which men rallied. Man's sense of corporate membership in a mystical body was, for many, most readily aroused by the sight of the flag than the sight of the cross. However, as humanism developed its legal rationale, justice had to go. The fundamental premise of humanism is Genesis chapter 3, verse 5. "Ye shall be as God," that is, every man his own God, "knowing," determining or establishing for yourselves good and evil. In one country after another, the foundations of the state and of the law were shifted from justice to the will of the state, or the will of the people, or the will of the dictatorship of the proletariat, and so on. The law of the states began to represent less and less justice and more a power block. The goal of men became the capture of the state machinery to control power in their own behalf, and justice became a facade. The facade, however, is cracking and crumbling. One result is a growing hostility to politicians, lawyers, and judges. Nothing the state can ever do can educate men out of the expectation of justice from the law, and when men become convinced that there is a radical difference between justice and the state and law, it will be the state and law that will pay the price. Just as the separation of gold and silver from money is destroying money by inflation, even more so does the separation of justice from the law destroy the state. In this development, the churches have been asleep to the revolution underway around them. They have failed to see what Kaufmann saw clearly, and Nietzsche, Stana, and others before him, that, where the God of Scripture is denied, guilt and justice cannot exist. They are theocentric or God-centered facts and are theological through and through. No, quote, return to the Constitution, end quote, can restore justice. Only a truly biblical faith can make justice again a reality. Justice is not a vague idea. It is the righteousness of God expressed in His law word. If we separate justice from the law of God, we are then left with saying that men as gods issue the articles of justice. The words justice and righteousness are one and the same. They express the meaning of the Hebrew word tzedak. If justice and law are not from the God who created all things, they are then from men who claim to be God, because justice and law declare the basic and inescapable accountability. To whom are we accountable? To God or to man and the state? The Bible is emphatic that the judgment is God's. Deuteronomy chapter 1 verse 17, because God is the creator, the lawgiver, and the all-righteous or all-just one. There can be no justice apart from Him in His law word. Justice is inescapably a theological fact. For Kaufmann, the goal of this legal revolution is quote-unquote liberation, a word used by a variety of movements in our time. In virtually every case, it means most of all liberation from God. Kaufmann said, liberation is a movement toward a goal, autonomy. The word autonomy tells it all. Auto, self, and nomos, law. Man becomes his own law. Kaufmann held, being autonomous and being liberated is the same thing. The classic statement of autonomy and liberation, according to Kaufmann, was Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 to 5. The serpent's promise. It means that nobody knows what is good. There is no such knowledge. Therefore, humanity should leave behind guilt and fear and, quote, be autonomous, end quote. Kaufmann saw the issue clearly. Our problem is that churchmen refuse to do so. They prefer to halt between two opinions. Elijah, faced with a Baal state like our own, said to the people, how long halt ye between two opinions? If the Lord be God, follow Him. But if Baal, then follow him. 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 21. The sad fact is that of the too many people who, as they see the law reduced to a game without justice, are ready to express anger, too few are ready to take the logical step and see that without God, there can be no justice. Paul Hoffman's study of a criminal lawyer sums up that lawyer's premise in its title. What the hell is justice? 1974. The man was logical. Without God, there can be neither truth nor justice, nor good and evil. Until men return to the living and triune God, justice will continue to be separated from law and the state, and from everyday life as well.